beautiful. Welcome, welcome. I hope you are doing well on this fine day. It's Shandy, and I have a beautiful shawl and scarf pattern to demonstrate for you today. I think you're gonna love this one. This gorgeous pattern designed by Jane Vancellis is great for practicing your knits and purls because literally those are the only stitches used in this design, not even joking. So the really cool thing about this pattern is it's composed of little squares and or rectangles depending on the version you decide to make. So when the light hits the different textures, it almost creates a 3D optical illusion. So it almost looks like every other square is popping out at you. Rawr! I love this design because it reminds me of a cobblestone path. It almost looks like little stones or bricks. So, you know, wandering down a path. Wink. This pattern also includes tips and tricks for varying the width of this pattern. You can make it as narrow or as wide as you want, as well as the length. You can make it any length. There's also information on varying these squares and rectangles so that you can make this just how you like. You can see for the scarf version, Jane used only squares throughout the entire piece. But for the shawl, she started with squares that slowly got longer and longer, shifted into rectangles, and then those shift back into squares. You could even start with squares, make columns throughout the entire piece, and then shift back into squares. Truly, the options are endless. I also think this design would make a great gift for just about anybody. Jane actually designed the scarf version for her husband. You could do a scarf, you could even make a baby blanket, you can make a shawl. Truly, this pattern can be for anybody. Another thing to keep in mind when knitting this pattern is your yarn choice. So you know how we were talking about the light bouncing off the different textures of the pattern? What really helps to accentuate that is to use a shimmering yarn. We opted for our Oasis Camel Silk fingering weight yarn because of the gorgeous gleam, which really lends itself well to patterns like this. Now that we've got all those formalities out of the way, I would love to show you how to actually knit this pattern. If you do want all the details, you can download the actual PDF with all the different options at expressionfiberarts.com, and we'll also put the direct link in the description for you. As a matter of fact, go ahead, pause the video, jump over to the site and get the pattern so that we can knit together. I'll see you in a minute. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, I can't use that music. I'm going to be casting on 22 stitches today using the long tail cast on method just to do a small demo for you. And I'm also going to be using a thicker yarn just so you can see it a little more easily. Next up in the pattern, you're going to work 6 rows of seed stitch. I'm just going to show you a couple rows just to give you an idea of what it looks like. If you would like a more in-depth tutorial on that, we do have a video, so you can check that out. You're going to start row 1 by knitting the first stitch, bring your yarn to the front, purl the next stitch, yarn to the back, knit, yarn to the front, purl. And you're going to continue that to the end of your row. Purl, knit, just making sure you're bringing your yarn to the front when you purl and to the back when you knit. I really love seed stitch because you can really get into a rhythm with it, and it looks like little seeds tossed on a field. You'll continue working the knits and purls all the way across your row until you get to the end, and then I'm going to show you what row 2 looks like. Purl, knit, and purl. And then I just like to check and make sure everything's looking good before I move on. All right, when you turn your work, here's what you're going to be looking at when you start row 2. Now, to work row 2, we're actually going to begin with a purl stitch, and then a knit stitch, and then purl, and then knit, and you're going to continue that all the way across your row. Now here's the concept of seed stitch. When you come to a little V, you're going to purl it. And when you come to a little purl bump, which I like to think of them as pearl necklaces, you're going to knit that. So here's a V, so we purl it. There's a little pearl bump, so we're going to knit it. And just repeat that across, and that is basically how you work seed stitch. I do love seed stitch because it doesn't curl. It's evenly balanced, so it makes a great border. And as long as you remember that you're knitting when you come to the little bumps and you're purling when you come to the V's, you can lay your work down, come back to it later, and you'll know exactly what stitch to work when you pick it up and start again. So continue repeating that across till you get to the end of your row. And that's what it should look like. So that is how you work seed stitch. Once you've done that for 6 rows, you're going to go ahead and jump in to the squares part. Let's go ahead and get started with row 7. You're going to start row 7 by continuing your seed stitch border along the edge. To do that, you're going to begin with a knit, a purl, a knit, a purl, and a knit. Now we're going to jump into the squares. So let's go ahead and knit 4 stitches. 2, 3, 4, yarn to the front, purl 4 stitches. 2, 3, 4. And you're going to repeat that all the way across your row. Knit 2, 3, 4, and you'll have more stitches, but just repeat knit 4, purl 4 until you have 5 stitches left. And then you're going to continue your seed stitch border by purling, knitting, purling, knitting, and purl. Continuing along, let's go ahead and work row 8. For row 8, you're going to begin with a purl stitch, and then a knit stitch, purl, knit, and purl, and that's our seed stitch border. Now we're going to purl these next 4 stitches, and you can see that because they have the little purl bumps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we've come to some V's, and since we're working the squares part, we're actually going to knit those. 2, 3, 4, and you're going to repeat that across your row. Purl 4, knit 4. Purl, 2, 3, 4. And then to work your seed stitch border, when you come to the end, you're going to knit, purl, knit, purl, and knit. For rows 9 and 10, they're super easy. You are just going to repeat rows 7 and 8. You're doing great. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to row 11. For row 11, we're going to begin with a knit stitch. And remember, when you are working seed stitch, which our borders are, when you come to a V, you purl them. And when you come to a little bump, you knit that. There's a V, so we purl it. There's a bump, so we knit it. So that's a 5-stitch seed stitch border. Now, we're going to work our squares and we're going to reverse them. So this is stockinette stitch here. Now we're going to reverse it and do reverse stockinette. So jump to the front and purl the next 4 stitches. 2, 3, 4. Yarn to the back, and now we're going to knit these 4 stitches. Knit, 2, 3, 4, and you're going to repeat that across your row. So purl 4, knit 4, purl, 2, 3, 4, and when you get to your 5 stitches here on the end. We've got a V, so we're going to purl that one. The next one is a bump, so we're going to knit it, purl, knit, and purl. And it should look like this. Let's keep working on those squares, and let's start on row 12. All right, for row 12, you're going to bring your yarn to the front to begin because we are starting with a purl stitch. And remember, when you come to a little bump, when you're working seed stitch, you're going to knit it. When you come to a V, you purl it, knit, purl. So there's our seed stitch border. Now we're going to jump in and continue our squares. So we are going to knit 4, 2, 3, 4, yarn to the front and purl the next 4, 2, 3, 4. Repeat that all the way across your row until you reach your 5-stitch seed stitch border. Knit, knit. When you do get over to your border, you're going to look and see what you've got here. Oh, you have a little bump. So since we're working seed stitch on those 5 stitches, we knit that one. There's a V, so we purl it, knit, purl, and knit. Next up, you're just going to repeat rows 11 and 12, and you're going to start to see those squares pop out. Once you've done that, you can see your seed stitch border along the sides and along the bottom. And then your little squares are starting to pop out in the middle. And if you flip it over, this pattern is actually completely reversible. So you've got your squares in the middle, surrounded by your lovely seed stitch border. And that is the general concept of this pattern. You're just gonna repeat rows 7 through 14 until your item is the length that you want, and then you finish off with another 6-row seed stitch border. Go ahead and make sure that you check out the pattern because we include information on how we actually worked the shawl. And there you have it, a fun, easy, beginner level pattern that you can customize to suit your preferences. We truly hope you love it. Remember to soak up this delightful day. Remember, it was made for you and it is full of treasures if we just look for them. Thanks again for joining me. I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.
Really?
Yeah. When the light hits it, okay, again, it's like the light is popping, darn it. So it's almost like a 3D illusion. Squares popping out at you.
Yeah, do that.
Squares popping out at
like
you.
Do that.
Rawr.
No, don't do that.
Okay, okay. I love this so much because, okay, okay, what did I start it with? Wait, there was something else I was supposed to say in there. I'll see you next time. Bye.